Let's do a little more on this on the Smothers. Tom and Dick, Tom and Dickie. Tell me about them. What were they like? What were they like to work with?
They were, because we weren't the producers of that show. We were the writers, just writers, but contributing writers. We didn't deal with them that much. It's funny, I got to know Tommy much better after, and I've seen him since. But during that time, he seemed very friendly and very helpful, and they were fine. They weren't like, it wasn't like a Jackie Gleason thing who disappears, who you don't even know he's there. They were there, and they seemed to, they enjoyed, when the stuff was good, they very complimentary, and they were fun to work with, I thought.
Tommy was pretty well known for waging battles, and were those battles chiefly with the network?
Yeah, I think strictly with the network. He didn't seem to battle with anybody on the show.
Did he seem to have fun doing that? Was there a part of it that was like, this is fun or challenging to do this, to kind of almost like needling to get things on?
I think there was something in him who enjoyed that. Yeah, very much so. He was like being the bad boy.
There was a kind of a famous, notorious, controversial appearance by Pete Seeger, who did basically an anti-Vietnam War song that was called Waist Deep in the Big Muddy.
Yeah, right. I remember that song.
Do you remember anything about that?
I don't. See, there was so much controversy like that I knew that, that's exactly something that Tommy would want on there and would fight for. And but I don't remember there being any. He may have been having fights with the network on that song, but it got done, right? I mean,
what I read is that actually it was performed and was cut the first time.
Oh, really?
And then Tommy had him come back and do it again.
Oh, that I didn't know. I didn't know.
That got through.
They didn't tell people like me that's stuff.
Having an interest in music, an early interest in writing music, there were several pop artists that performed on the Smothers Brothers. Did you have any particular insight into that, or even a vote on who might be on, or?
No, not at all. In fact, the music thing, it's funny. It was kind of, I knew it. Some people early on may have known it, but I kept it. I accepted the fact that it didn't look like I was going to make a living doing music. So I'm a little sorry now, because I could have even approached some of those people, but I never had that kind of audacity, I was doing what I was doing, and in that period, it was an exciting period, because I was getting more and more work, and better and better salaries, and so it was the career was going very well. So I completely forgot about the music.
In front of the camera, Tommy and Dickie were the brothers, where Tommy was always kind of the doofus and said the kind of funny setup lines. Dickie was the more kind of level-headed, straight man in a way. Behind the scenes, was Tommy more instrumental in sort of kind of running the show, or making the decisions about the show?
Yeah, no question.
And did Dick, was Dick in agreement with him, though? Did they were
the
same?
He seemed to be. Yeah, but Tommy definitely was the one in charge. He enjoyed it, he wanted to be the guy running it, and his brother didn't seem to mind. I think his brother had other interests too, outside of the business. I forget, he had cars or racing cars or something.
Right, that's right. There were a couple of sketches that were kind of regular sketches. I wondered if they started at the time you were there. One was Lee French with the tea with Goldie. Was that going on when you were there?
That was going on. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Did you all
I think we worked on some of those. Yeah.
And then of course Pat Paulson.
Pat Paulson. Yeah, we worked on some of those too. That was fun, because he could get away with a lot of stuff and do political things.
He was such a dry sort of, his delivery.
Yeah,
was
very funny.
Funny in itself. When you would write for him, were you hearing his voice?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's the one thing that you get to learn. When I wrote for the comics in New York, every comic had a different approach, a different speech pattern, a different type of comedy. Even though they were all kind of the same bag. But you got to do that. You got to learn to write in people's rhythms and syncopation. You just did that automatically. I mean, at least I did that and still do that.
Well, is there a trick or is there a tip that helps you that you could pass on to other writers, and how to do that?
I don't know how you pass that on. You either you have an ear for comedy. A lot of it is timing and inflections. You just I think you just learn it. If you're lucky enough, as I was, to have had that kind of training, that comes very easy to me. I don't even think of that.
Well, a lot of times with writers, with songwriters, people will say, what comes first, the music or the
right,
lyrics?
Right.
In terms of writing for a character, is it what comes first, the joke and then the voice? Or is it is it sort of all organically combined?
Yeah, it's sort of all combined, because you can't separate them. First of all, when you hear it as a finished product, right? A finished sentence, a finished joke. You don't question why it's phrased. It either works or it doesn't, and a lot of it has to do with it being the right combination of the emphasis on a certain word and the word itself. A good example of that is you can write a joke with a punchline and have different people read it. And most people will read it, and it might be funny for everybody, but if you read it the exact correct way, it'll get the biggest laugh.
The two general subjects that seem to be the most controversial with the Smothers Brothers show was jokes and sketches about the Vietnam War,
right.
Anti-war, and then drugs.
Yeah.
Was there any instruction or any sort of overall, I don't know if agenda is the word, but at least a suggestion that you try to write jokes to that, or was it just?
Yeah, and it's funny when it comes to the drugs. Whoever wrote those jokes, it wasn't Sam or myself, because we weren't into that, and we probably wouldn't know how to do those jokes. But we did we were very anti-war, as were most people on that show, I'm sure. But we would like to write the anti-Vietnam jokes much more than the drug. The drug things came probably from Tommy, and some of the people that hung around them. They kind of liked that, and I understand, from what I understand, the following year it got into that even more. There was a lot more of the so-called drug culture. But Sam and I were kind of like two innocents in that field. We didn't, we thought those were easy jokes somehow, and we didn't do those. So I don't know who did them.
For someone who is well-versed in what was controversial at that time, you were working in the 60s and in the 70s, and comedy today, do you find it all ironic that some things that were controversial and looked down upon then would easily fly now, but then there are other things that back then, terms and ways of referring to people, that wouldn't fly now?
Yeah, right, I know.
What's your reaction to that?
The reaction is that things change, and you sort of have to go with it or not. It's like when I was writing for comics, as I said, they barely said "damn" in a nightclub, and somehow I think, and in TV too, of course, it was a little harder. It's easier to throw in a fuck here and there. But now it's become part of the language, so it's almost like talk, it's regular talk. But it was harder. It's harder to construct a joke or a sketch, not relying on that kind of thing, language. And in fact, the shows, I watch very little. And I never did. Even when I was writing, I didn't watch that. I had other interests on the outside. But it's hard. Every comedy show on TV now, they're all doing basically the same kind of a lot of toilet humor. That didn't exist before. You know, that would have been very daring. I remember when I was in New York in the late '50s, sitting around with other writers and a few comics, and a word came back. This was like big news, that the word fuck had been used on stage in Las Vegas. And it was attributed to Buddy Hackett, who was the first one to say fuck it. And that came back, and they said, oh my God, do you hear? Buddy Hackett said fuck on stage. Never mind TV, on stage. In Vegas yet, as if it would matter there. So that's how much things have changed.
Yeah.
The other thing, by the way, that's changed, and this annoys me a bit, is that sketches now on TV, and including Saturday Night Live, don't bother with an ending. Things just end. They do comedy. Endings were crucial when you wrote comedy sketches. As funny as the sketch was, you had to end it on the biggest laugh possible, and you would work forever trying to get that. And that's hard to do after, especially if a sketch is funny, and you want the funniest to be at the end, or the big surprise to be at the end. See, that's sort of it seems to have gone out the window. So I think it was harder then.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I remember distinctly in the earlier days of Saturday Night Live, they had, I think it was Herb Sargent, they had some of the older guard comedians.
Herb Sargent was part of it.
Consulting with them.
Yes,
and it
for that
seems
reason.
like a lot of those sketches were funnier, and a lot of people who criticize the show say it's just not as funny as it used to be.
It's not as funny. I mean, I haven't watched it. I haven't seen it in years now,
Yeah.
but that's what I remember, right?
Interesting. What do you think the legacy of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Show Hour is?
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. I know that whenever I meet people and somebody says he wrote to Smothers, their eyes light up. So it was an important show, and I'm glad I wrote. You know, I had a year of it. And I think I'd say they're groundbreaking to an extent. You know, they helped that kind of thing. That's why they're still remembered, as a lot of shows aren't.
So after you left the Smothers Brothers, you and Sam Bobrick worked on many projects together, both TV and Broadway.
Yeah, right.
What was it about your partnership that clicked? What was it about, you said that you clicked, but what was it about you two that worked out?
Yeah, what worked out is that we made each other laugh. Like whenever I said something funny, he appreciated it, and vice versa. So, and to this day, when we have lunch, we riff, you know, just not meaning to, just talking about anything. We make each other laugh. So it was a very good partnership.
Do you feel like you each bring something different to the collaboration?
Maybe a little bit, although I think we both do a lot of the same things. But and we seem to, what we were able to do on TV, we were able to do it quickly, which is a prerequisite for television. You know, they want it, they're shooting it in an hour. So we were very good at knocking something off. And we always kind of prided ourselves in writing something. We didn't settle for the cheap jokes, you know, we tried to make it a little better.
Did you always write together, or did you separate sometimes?
We always wrote together, yeah.
So you mentioned this earlier, and let's go ahead and get into some of the shows that you worked on, starting with, I guess, the one that took you away from the Smothers Brothers, the Kraft Music Hall, right?
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting job because, excuse me, Kraft Music Hall presented a show every week, a big show, but it varied. sometimes it would be a singing show, in which case our weeks were rather easy, writing, cute introductions and things. They'd do an entire hour of Steve and Edie singing Gershwin, or they'd do another one, I don't know, the country, by, what's his name, Arnold.
Eddie Arnold.
Eddie Arnold for an hour. Well, there were very few sketches and that kind of thing. The times when we had to work hard was when they would do something with people like Alan King, kind of a big comedy special. Then we'd really work hard at writing a bunch of sketches. One week, excuse me, one week we did a big roast for Johnny Carson, and had every star imaginable on there, including Bob Hope and Groucho Marx, and we wrote those things for a bunch of them. So that was a lot of work too. But most of the shows were of the other kind, which allowed us, by the way, that's why we had enough time in between writing. We'd have like hours to spend where we wrote our first play together, which, by the way, was written because I had met Lou Jacoby at the Chateau Marmont years before on that trip. And I always thought I had seen Lou on Broadway, who was sensational. He's one of the funniest Broadway actors ever. And I said to Sam, we should write a play for him, because I know I'll be able to get it to him. And so we came up with the idea for the play, and did get it to him, and he did wind up doing it, which is amazing.
What was the name of that?
And Norman, Is That You? Which, by the way, that's a 2-hour story in itself of what happened to that play and how it's still playing. Yeah. 30 years, 40 years later.
And there was a movie version, wasn't there?
There was a movie version of it too.
The Kraft Music Hall, was it primarily the Eddie Arnold hosted ones that you did, or you did others too?
No, all of them.
You did, okay.
We did all of them. We did an entire year, and then part of our deal was to do a summer show, to produce a summer show, produce and write, and we had a choice of to do one in England, in London, and one in Hawaii with Don Ho. And we chose Don Ho because it seemed like it'd be a vacation, which it was. It was a very nice, easy job.
When you had a guest like John Biner, who was known, great impressionist,
right.
Would you write material for him, or would he write his own?
He'd probably bring something, and then we would write extra stuff, or sometimes write a complete thing for him, yeah.
Okay, so this is the part where I'm going to mention some shows and let you just go ahead and say what you like about them. Let's start with the Tim Conway Comedy Hour.
The best job I ever had. Simon, and he'd say the same thing. Tim Conway is one of the most inventive, clever persons, original, that I've ever met. Now, he has since become a really good friend. My wife and I have traveled with he and his wife all over the world. That show, and it's a shame, it had a bad time slot. Then that's the problem with TV. If you wind up in a bad spot, you get overshadowed and maybe missed, But it was a very daring show. I think we did 13 shows. But they were so original, so different. Now, there's a case where the star participated a lot. He loved writing, and he came up with many of the ideas. But it was the most fun we ever had. I know, most fun I ever had on any show was writing that show, because of the people who were on it, and we were all having fun. And it was a crazy show, We had guest stars like no other show. We had people like Lana Turner, Joan Crawford, Greer Garson. I mean, we got old movie stars, and they were so out of place in this setting, which made it very, very funny. But Tim is the one who came up. Tim was never, he wasn't that good at being a host. That wasn't his thing. His thing was sketches. I mean, he was brilliant. As everybody knows, he went on to Carol Burnett and, practically stole the show. It was so funny. But when we had these stars on, we had to do something with them. You know, what do you do with Lana Turner? So the premise was that he would come out, they'd come out together, and he would talk to them as if they had gone to high school together. And he'd reminisce about dates and football games. And basically, they just reacted to what he said. So that was a way of using, and then we'd use them, of course, in sketches. But it's terrible to say, but that's maybe the highlight of all television that I did was that show.
Did Conway like to improv a lot, or did
Yeah,
he
he
rehearse?
did. He would change things when which he did on the Burnett show, I guess. But we once did a sketch, a very funny sketch about a locker room at halftime at a football game with a team that's losing like 70-0 or something, and he's going to come in and be the pep talk guy. So the sketch was very, very funny. But when it came time to shoot it, he came in as Hitler with the mustache and the accent. Well, the sketch fell apart because everybody on there, which was a lot of good people on there. McLean Stevenson was a regular, John Amos, a bunch of great regular people that were on that show. Sally Struthers. It was a long list. Anyway, he came and did that Hitler thing. They couldn't keep a straight face, and we put that one on the air because it was so funny. But Tim is that kind of person.
There were looked like there were a couple of entities of his variety show. One was like 12 episodes, another was like 13. It didn't seem to last as long.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think was there a reason for that, or?
No, I think he was always a little different. Sometimes he was in shows that probably didn't deserve to last. They kept giving him a show because he was so brilliant, you know. But sometimes he was in the wrong format, I guess. But this time he was in a very good format, and the sketches were very offbeat. They were like, who's that English group that did such,
Monty Python? Or?
Yeah, it had a Monty Python quality, only like an American version of that. And with a guy like Conway at the top of it. And the sketches there wasn't a regular sketch in there. They were all like really offbeat ideas. And it had interestingly enough, a year later, this was kind of a nice, rewarding, felt rewarding anyway. I was in I was probably with Pat McCormick in the Polo Lounge or something, having a drink. And he introduced me to Paddy Chayefsky. And he said to Paddy Chayefsky, Pat knew him, and he said, "Oh, this is Ron Clark. He wrote and produced he writes and produced the Tim Conway show." And Chayefsky got up and gave me a hug, and he said, "Pat is the funniest thing." He says, "My son and I, every Sunday night, watch it religiously." And I said, "Oh my God, this was worth it just to Paddy Chayefsky. Who knew he liked that kind of thing, you know?" Anyway, that was, so there was a following and he told me, and his son said, universities get together at night on Sunday nights and watch, but I guess not enough of them did it. Right. And it was replaced by some stupid shows. I was replaced by a show called the Chimp and I, about a monkey. So a monkey replaced Conway.
I guess monkeys are funny, or at least they thought
I guess.
That. Yeah. Well, those stories are great because you hear about, like celebrities, A-list celebrities who sitting home watching like Jeopardy. I mean, it's just, you never know.
Yeah, right,
you really
exactly.
You never know. You and Sam Bobbitt wrote a pilot for the Paul Lynde show.
Yeah, we wrote the pilot, and then the show, we didn't stay with the show. For some reason at the time, and maybe Sam more than I, but didn't want to stay, didn't feel like staying with the show. He thought it would be boring. Maybe he had done shows earlier that he was bored before I met him, I mean. Anyway, first of all, we were offered other things at the time, so we went on and left the show. It's too bad because Paul Lynde was a very funny guy, very, very funny guy. In fact, many, many years later, he toured in a play that Sam and I wrote, not Norman, another play, and was very successful in it. And he was a big star, you know, in the country. He was at one time the biggest name to put in a play in the country. He was the most famous. He got the most money. He had an incredible following. He was a very funny guy. He could be nasty though at times. Apparently, he drank a little and could turn on people. He never did it with us, but I had heard a lot of stories. But he was funny.
And you wrote a pilot for Diana Rigg called
Yeah,
Diana. Was that a comedy?
Yeah, it was a comedy. And that was with, I think Leonard Stern was involved in that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I remember we went to London to meet with her. And again, we didn't stay with the show. We were offered to and didn't for some other reason. And that one I'm a little sorry we didn't, because she was so good. You know, she's a very good actress.
It looked like it was on for half a season or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. So you mentioned that you and Sam had worked on several Broadway shows. Was
Yeah.
that concurrent with your TV work, or did you take a
No,
left turn and start
no,
doing that?
it was always while we were doing other things. We would do it part-time. We were very lucky in that we wrote 4 plays together, and all 4 went to Broadway, and within a period of 10 years or so, 10, 11 years, I think. The problem is not, by the way, this is terrible, but not one of them was a hit. However, every single one of them became a hit after. Very strange. We had like a little bit of bad luck in that, for instance, the first one, The Norman Is That You, was kind of a daring concept. It was the first comedy dealing with homosexuality. And the whole premise was that it was a father, Lou Jacobi, played by Lou Jacobi, who finds out his son is gay, and he has no idea what gay is. All he knows is that it's not right. And so his ignorance is where all the jokes come out of. And it's a very funny play. It got rave reviews from everybody except the New York Times. And at the time, it's different now. At the time, if you had a bad review from the New York Times, the chances are you couldn't run.
They could kill a show, right?
They could kill a show. And the producers, you can fight a bad review, especially if you have one bad and you got 12 great ones. And they kept coming in, Time Magazine, and one after the other, saying that this was one of the funniest shows ever. And it was very, very funny, actually. And also interesting, very daring in a way, because it was dealing with a subject that had not been dealt with on Broadway. But our producer sort of, when he saw that one review, kind of panicked. He was unfortunately, he was a producer who, it was his first play. He didn't quite know the business, so he wasn't able to keep it open. In not keeping it open, he did us an unbelievable favor. The Dramatist Guild has certain conditions under which the authors retain rights and share them with producers and backers and stuff like that. At that time, the way things were set up, because the show closed prematurely, Sam and I own that show 100%. We 50-50. And since then, it's played all over the world, 33 countries so far. And it's been a big hit in some of them. I mean, a runaway hit, like in Paris, it went 3 years and it came back for 2 more. Then it went on a tour and it came back for 2 more. Anyway, it's been like that all over the world. So in the long run, it's turned out to be a very good thing for us. But it would have been better to have a hit. And the same thing happened the other 3 shows. By the way, that first show was directed by George Abbott, one of the great of all time. The second show was directed by Abe Burrows, another
a legend.
A legend, yeah. And that play closed prematurely also. And that one is also still being done. In fact, it just played 6 months recently in Paris again. And then the third one goes on, is played constantly everywhere.
Murder at the Howard Johnsons. Yeah.
In fact, now there's we've written a screenplay for that one finally, and it's out there. Who knows what'll happen? And that one is opening in France next year as well. And then Wally's Cafe, there was a tour, in fact, with Tim Conway that I wound up directing. That was a lot of fun, and that play is done too. So we've had four non-hits that continue to be played to this day. It's an amazing story.
That could be a record too, actually.
It is a record. They once wrote an article early on Norman of plays that didn't make it and went on to have another life. It was a couple of years after Norman had closed. But now we not only had one, we've had four of those that continue. So anyway, we did that while we were doing a lot of TV. And at some point after the fourth play, which was 1981, I think, Wally's Cafe.
June 81.
Yeah. After that, Sam wanted to write some more plays, and I sort of I felt that we were writing the same kind of play. I mean, they were all different, but the certain kind of humor that were getting harder and harder to produce on Broadway. In fact, Neil Simon at one point couldn't get a play on. Neil Simon, of all people. And one of the reasons is that TV wound up doing all those same kind of things, so that now harder than ever to get a comedy on Broadway. In fact, it's almost impossible. Sometimes there's one, and it's because it's coming from London, and it has some kind of subject matter that's really, really different, So we stopped. Now Sam likes to write plays, and he writes and continues to write them. He does it almost as a hobby. He likes to. He's very different. I tend to plan things much more carefully and a longer period. He can sit down and just write. So he's written a lot of. He had several of them published by Samuel French. I only wrote. I wrote a couple. I wrote one. Now it's many years ago, and that one is doing very well too. And I wrote it, by the way, for. I had Tim Conway in it, and we did it in Westport Playhouse in Connecticut.
Let's talk about some of the shows you've done, I guess, without Sam.
Yeah, right.
Later on.
Yeah, because I continued after doing
right.
a bunch of things.
So let me name some. Let me just name some show names, and if you have a comment about them. That Girl.
Yeah, I think I only wrote one episode of that. So it was just I may have written two. I forget, one or two. I forget.
Directed by John Rich, though, who was
right.
a great comedy director.
Yeah. I wound up working with Rich again later on some other thing.
Norman Lear produced a show called Hotel Baltimore.
Yeah, that was interesting. I was like I guess I was like a consultant on that. Well, maybe not. I forget.
Oh, has it? You co-wrote the pilot.
No, I you know what? That's not right.
Oh.
I didn't write the pilot. No. I wish I had. I remember seeing that play. It was a very good play, Hotel Baltimore. And the series was kind of good too. But I left it, and I left it for, oh God, it was some sort of, it was a contractual thing. They brought in a writer, and he was going to get a credit that was similar to mine. And in my deal, he wasn't allowed to do that. So my agent said, "You want to get paid off and go do something else?" And I said, "Yeah." So I left the show. I was sorry to leave because I liked the people around there and I liked the show, but I wound up with a hunk of money. and I left on very good terms because Norman Lear I know very well and I see every now and then. But my agent was able to get me the money and get me another job after that. So I left it for that reason.
And it ended after 13 episodes.
Yeah, I know.
Canceled.
It didn't go
Was
that
that the
long.
first time that you met Norman Lear? Was on that show?
No, I had met him socially otherwise through I'd met him through Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner and Larry Gelbart.
Did you work with him on that show, on that experience with Hotel?
Not really.
No.
No. He was there and I was there, and he was there when we'd have the reading. But I didn't work, just with him. I didn't know.
Okay. What about the Tim Conway sitcom Ace Crawford?
Oh, that's
Private
another.
Eye?
That's another highlight. That's too bad. That's one that didn't make it. But that was a lot of fun too, because it was Tim again. Now that one I worked on. I think I produced it too, right? It says.
Right. Co-created and produced it.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That was a very funny idea. It was kind of like a Clouseau type thing with not a French guy, an American. So Tim was the detective, but and he had a sidekick, and the sidekick was a very good actor who wound up as a regular on another show. Oh God, what the hell was his name?
Was it Joe Regalbuto?
Yes,
who
exactly.
Was on Murphy Brown later?
That's it, right. Terrific. And they were terrific together, like a team.
Right.
And kind of, Regalbuto played kind of the guy who screwed up. But the idea that Conway was a detective was hilarious. And there was some funny things in there. We had a piano player, a blind, an actor, I forgot, a black African-American guy, terrific talent, who played, he was the piano player in the bar,
right? Okay.
And he was supposed to be blind, but he somehow he would know everything without, while being blind. And then we had a bartender, which was Billy Barty.
Billy Barty has Bill Henderson.
Yeah, Bill Henderson. Bill Henderson was a piano player. Right. Billy Barty was behind the bar, and you could only see him from here.
Billy Barty's a little person.
Yeah,
right?
very little. Right. So he would just put the drinks up on top. And then there was a girl in there too. Who
was it Shiro Denise?
Yeah, who was married, by the way, to the Columbo guy.
Oh.
That was his wife.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting, okay.
Anyway, that was a very fun kind of, and it looked like it could be a lot of fun. And Tim, again, participated a lot. Peter Falk, right? Yeah, Peter Falk's wife.
Right. Well, as funny as Tim Conway is, why do you think those couple of shows
I don't know.
really kind of failed after a very short life?
Yeah. One of the reasons is ratings, whatever, who knows what he was up against, and somehow, I don't know. And yet, when he was on the Carol Burnett show, he was practically the star of that, like he really became well known with that.
In the mid 80s or so, you wrote a couple episodes of Silver Spoons.
Yeah, no, I was actually on there as a consultant. That was kind of a fun show. Nice, pleasant, very nice people there. It was nice. It's funny. I reached a period at this point. I was getting older, I guess, and I kept getting these offers to do consultant, and they pay you a lot of money, and you somehow you didn't have the burdens and the responsibilities of a producer, so it was kind of a pretty good job.
Well, yeah, a young Ricky Schroeder was the star of the show, who later did, as an adult, NYPD Blue,
as a
detective. But it says that on these two episodes, each one had a pretty heavyweight guest star, John Houseman on one. And
Houseman was on a lot of those shows.
And Ray Walston on another.
Yeah.
That must have been interesting writing for those.
Now, those were specifically my credits, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But, when you're a consultant or you work on a show, you wind up writing a lot of the other things, a lot of the other shows. This, you get a credit because it's your specific story,
Right. Well, the John Houseman episode, I guess appropriately, it was called Pardon My French. So.
You know why? The reason was another guest star on there was a woman named Lynn Renault, who was a very famous French actress, singer. And she, it's so complicated. She's a friend of mine because she gave me a French play to adapt into an American play, which I did around that same period. and the play was produced and toured in Florida, and it was very successful, but they couldn't raise the money to bring it, hopefully, to New York. But she starred in the play, and so when this episode, I came up with the episode, I came up with the episode and the woman to play the part, and she became a sort of a love interest to Houseman.
Right.
So that's why, in fact, he was hired after to be her
yeah, it does
love
mention
interest.
that it was a recurring role for Houseman, but one of his final parts because
Yeah.
he died the next year in
Yeah,
1988.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
You did a notable episode in kind of TV history, which was the final. You wrote the final episode
Yeah.
of Moonlighting.
Yes, now that again, that's by accident. I was a consultant on that show, again, a terrific job, and I would go in just occasionally and, look over scripts and stuff like that. And then I had an assignment, or I came up with the idea to write an episode, which was okayed, and I started writing it. And as I started writing it, suddenly there was talk of the show. There was supposed to be 3 or 4 more shows after, but they decided for financial reasons, whatever, the show had run its course. I think it ran 5 years or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a very prestigious show. I mean, it was highly regarded.
Very popular,
Yeah,
too.
very popular too, and with a big star who
Right.
became an even bigger star.
Right, Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis, yeah.
And a lot of people feel like when they got married or something,
Yeah.
it kind of was like the jump the shark moment where the popularity,
Yeah, I know.
It's like that, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
the tension,
exactly.
the sexual tension works, and then
Right.
when you culminate. So, what
But-
was the premise of this?
The premise, actually, my premise, I don't even remember my premise.
But you got the cancellation
Yeah,
notice
then
while you were writing it?
well, then was the idea of closing the office.
Right.
But then I got a lot of help on that last script because things came up that I didn't even know about. I hadn't been with the show forever, so I wound up by default writing the very last show. So it's a Trivial Pursuit question. Who wrote the last show? So it's strange. I participated with a lot of people on that. I wound up with the credit because I had started, and whatever my premise, I don't remember my premise. I'd have to look at the script.
Was the original series creator, Glenn Gordon
Yeah.
Caron, even around it then, or was he
Yeah,
already
no,
off the show?
he was still there.
Was still there.
Yeah,
So if I remember the episode right, it was like there was a case going on at a detective
Right.
ring, and then
There was always
sort
a-
of some way in the midst of the show, they find out that they're closing down or it's canceled, and
Yeah.
then you see them with the sets
Yes.
being
Yeah,
wrapped
yeah,
up,
yeah,
and they're
right.
running around the 20th Century Fox lot or something. Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis
yeah,
in character, something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is pretty crazy.
Yeah,
But people have things for final episodes.
yeah, I know.
Either good or
I know.
bad. So.
In fact, I don't even know if I've ever seen that. I should look it up.
Were you on set at all for any of that, or?
Once or twice. I remember I was on the set when Sybil was in the scene, and she looked out. I remember her saying to the director, "Who's that?" I had to be introduced to her. Well, I hadn't been there a while, and I wasn't there all that long.
What was the reception to that episode? Do you even know?
To the last
To
episode?
the last episode.
I think it was pretty good.
Yeah.
A lot of people were sorry to see the show go off because at the time, before I got there, I remember, and I had seen quite a few episodes because it was very offbeat. It was different from most shows.
Mm-hmm.
It had a nice quality to it. But I remember people, friends of mine, saying it was their favorite show at the time.
You wrote for a couple of Ed Weinberger sitcoms. The first,
Yeah.
The Man in the Family, and Baby Talk.
Yes.
Any thoughts about working with
Yeah,
Weinberger?
Yeah, several.
Okay.
And they're not good.
Okay. Well, you're free to speak your mind. And whatever.
He was very, very strange. He was very nice to me,
Yeah.
and I think part of it was because I had done Broadway plays. That always impresses people, whether they're hits or not. They're impressed because most writers would like to have that, including some big-name writers in this city have never done it. They're either afraid to, because it is, well, now it's probably impossible, but it was kind of chancy, to do that. You do lay yourself on the line. But anyway, so he seemed to have respect for me, and he was very nice to me. But I saw him be very nasty to other people. He had a temper, and he just he was gruff, kind of unpleasant. And I remember on one of the shows, George Clooney, who was and is a very nice, decent human being, got into a thing with him, and he got into a thing with him concerning a secretary, because Weinberger was insulting and demeaning, and George threatened to go to the press to expose him. That's how furious he was about it. So Weinberger was not beloved, but I guess he was pretty good at his craft. By the way, there's a show there that you may not have on your list, and this is an interesting story too. George Clooney wound up on ER, but there was an ER before the ER. There was an E-R.
Right.
And one of the best shows I ever worked on. One of the very best shows I ever worked on. It starred George Clooney, Elliot Gould, Jason Alexander, Conchata Farrell, and another actress who wound up getting an Academy Award for something of Wolves. Who's that woman?
Is it Mary McDonnell?
Mary McDonnell. These are all the people in this one show about a hospital. Hilarious show.
Comedy, though.
Comedy, but very, very funny comedy with very good people.
And that was a Norman Lear production?
No, it was a Turteltaub and Ornstein.
Ah.
Very, very, one of the best shows. Again, that didn't, God knows why it didn't last. It was funny, it was clever, and it had all these great people in it.
Another Trivial Pursuit note, too.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But it's so funny that George Clooney was in 2 ERs. Exactly. Nobody knows that, it seems.
Did you work with Amy Heckerling, with one of the creators of Baby Talk? Because I know there was a movie first.
Yeah. No, right.
Okay.
There was a movie called Baby Talk. Then there was a series, right?
Right.
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Let's talk about working with Mel Brooks. Now, you did
that I could talk for a long time, too.
Movies, but
yeah. Well, the way I met Mel Brooks, I met him through Carl. I guess I met Carl Reiner first, and I met Mel Brooks. I think maybe played tennis with him or something. But and I sort of knew him a bit. I got an idea one day for a movie, for a silent movie, and it's funny when the idea came to me, and I said, "Geez, I think there's something there. A silent movie in this time, done in color, but not a word spoken." And I had a lot of I thought of, and the idea was that a director trying to get people to be in it, and how difficult it would be to talk people into doing it, which is the premise of the movie. I remember I got it while I was shaving, the idea. By the time I finished shaving, I had a couple of pages of things that wound up in the movie, including the idea of Marcel Marceau.
The only spoken word in the entire movie?
He refuses to be in the movie, and he says no. So I said, geez, this is a funny idea. Not only did I have that idea, I actually got him to do it. I went to see Marcel Marceau at Royce Hall and spoke with him and talked him into making the movie. And the reason I could go see him is because the star of Norman, Is That You in Paris was a good friend of Marcel Marceau, and he told Marceau that I was coming to talk to him. So everything connects. Yeah. It's amazing. Anyway, I brought it to Mel, and Mel says, I'll have lunch with you, but I don't want ideas. I got plenty of ideas. He says, I'll listen to you. And by the end of our sandwich, he said, okay, who do we get to write it with us? Because he's used to working with different, and a lot of people, because he came from that originally, I guess, on television, So I said, geez, I got two guys for you. I got, and the guys I'd worked on, I had hired, or Sam and I had hired, on the Tim Conway Comedy Hour, Rudy DeLuca and Barry Levinson. And he said, okay. He says, well, I like them. I said, yeah, you'll love them. So we all met, and he liked them right away. And we decided that we formed a deal. In fact, I wound up, my company hired them to come and work on the movie. And then the four of us put the whole movie together. And while we were doing that, we came up with the next movie, which was High Anxiety. And we did all that together. Then I became very good friends with Mel. And in fact, to this day, and Thanksgiving spent with Mel. And he and his wife and my wife and I went on many trips around the world, and we saw them. We became very, very close friends.
You got a Writers Guild nomination for, I think, Silent Movie. Right?
Yeah, right.
What was that like? I mean, just I mean, you know, just to get some notice.
That was nice. I also got one
Peers.
and won one for Smothers Brothers way back, and I won another one for a special for a what's his name? Oh God!
It's good timing. We have the sirens going.
Yeah,
now,
okay.
so.
I'll remember it.
And you had an Emmy nomination too in there somewhere, I know.
Yeah, somewhere. I forget. The nominations don't excite me that much.
Yeah.